Okay, hello everyone. Clark Towson here. I'm the CEO of INTJ Billing. Today's video, I've got a question that nobody in the Australian media seems to be talking about or asking this particular question. So I'm going to do their job for them. I'm going to ask the question myself. How did FTX manage to become an AUSTRAC registered digital currency exchange provider? Why isn't the Australian media grilling AUSTRAC over this? We should be seeing article after article in the major news media about why AUSTRAC admitted FTX to their register. We should be seeing press conferences by AUSTRAC executives explaining how they stuffed up and what changes they're going to make in the future to ensure they don't admit such a company to the register again. Instead, we get crickets. FTX even managed to obtain an Australian financial services license. You smell that? Something's rotten in Australia's financial regulations. So AUSTRAC, in my opinion, has messed up big time. It would be very interesting to see FTX's application and the regulator's response to it. So it truly astounds me that FTX managed to be admitted to AUSTRAC's registry as a digital exchange provider in Australia. Now, I personally know just how difficult it is to get on AUSTRAC's registries, as my small one-man company tried and failed, thus forcing me offshore. And I put a lot of time, effort, and work into my application. Now, something is not right at AUSTRAC when a company like FTX managed to be admitted. Knowledgeable people within the cryptocurrency space, people like Swan Bitcoin CEO Cory Klippsten, for example, he knew that FTX, just like Celsius, was a house of cards a long time before it collapsed, and he was publicly critiquing both FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried. So why didn't AUSTRAC realize this? And why didn't they deny the FTX application? Now, if something is an obvious Ponzi scheme, how come AUSTRAC didn't notice? Why didn't they reject their application to be on the registry as a digital exchange in Australia? Now, my company INTJ Billing, my application was denied on the grounds of my corporate controls, especially around KYC/AML, know your customer, and anti-money laundering requirements. I wasn't able to satisfy those requirements at the time that I submitted my application. They didn't like the market that I serve either, setting up Bitcoin wallets for Thai sex workers so their supporters in the Western world can send them Bitcoin, which I would convert into Thai baht for them. Now, in my dealings with AUSTRAC, I suspected that I was way ahead of the curve in what I was doing, and ahead of them technically in my understanding and use of Bitcoin and the Bitcoin Lightning Network. I suspected that AUSTRAC didn't have the technical experts on staff to understand the pioneering innovation that I was providing to the sex work marketplace. Now, they could have tried to work with me and thought to themselves, well, we've got a good guy here in Clark Towson who's a technical expert, but who is not yet able to satisfy our requirements. But let's give him a go. Let's give him a shot. And over time, he will improve on his AML KYC. But no, they chose to reject me out of hand straight away instead. Then we have FTX, which was an obvious Ponzi scheme, okay? And yet they were good enough to satisfy AUSTRAC on the KYC and AML front, and all the rest of AUSTRAC's requirements, including a police and character check on whoever submitted FTX's application, and they get approved. And something is not right with that. So I'm just wondering if it's possible under a Freedom of Information request to get FTX's AUSTRAC application. That would make for some very, very interesting reading. All right. Now, my own company's rejected application gives a ton of insight into what goes into such an application to be admitted to AUSTRAC's registries. And it's a huge amount of time, effort, and work to create the application. FTX had enough money, time, and people, resources to be able to satisfy the regulator, with the regulator almost certainly making their final decision based on the AML/CTF and the Financial Transaction Reports Act that they're responsible for administering. So it's the lesson in Australia. One can run an obvious Ponzi scheme so long as one is able to satisfy the regulator, which makes its decisions based on the acts. That Ponzi scheme will be admitted to the registry versus a tiny company like mine, which is not a Ponzi scheme. And I tried to do the right thing and tried to provide an honest service for people, yet I'm denied, my company is denied, as I couldn't yet, or I couldn't at the time, okay, fully satisfy the Australian regulator under the acts. It just seems to be madness to me. So I was just thinking about this today, and I thought that I'd make a video about it because I don't think enough hard questions are being asked of AUSTRAC. And I think it's only a matter of time before the media cottons on to this and figures, hang on a second, there's a huge amount of detail that goes into an application to be registered as a digital currency exchange and a money remittance provider. How did FTX pass AUSTRAC's requirements? So there's a deficiency there, right? Now, if I was working for AUSTRAC, right, I work in the digital currency space. I've been researching Bitcoin for many years. I'm a computer scientist, high performance computing system administrator. With all my knowledge and experience, let's say FTX's application came across my desk and I was working at AUSTRAC. I would have taken one look at it and I would have said, this is a Ponzi scheme, okay? I wouldn't have even bothered doing anything else. I would have rejected the application based on the fact that FTX was a Ponzi scheme. How would I have known it was a Ponzi scheme? Well, there were people within the Bitcoin space, people like Corey Klippstein and others who, for months before FTX collapsed, were publicly stating that it is a Ponzi scheme, right? And it would have been the same thing if Celsius came across my desk as well, right? That was another obvious Ponzi scheme from the very beginning. So it just really makes one wonder, hang on a second, if an obvious Ponzi scheme can be successfully added to AUSTRAC's registry, something is very, very seriously wrong with financial regulation within Australia, right? So now I've got some experience, okay? This is another subject, but it's related because the lesson is, I think the lesson is the same. I've been coming here to Pattaya, Thailand for 10 years. And over those 10 years, I've developed friendships with a number of Thais. I got a visa for one Thai person. I successfully obtained a visa for a Thai person, a friend of mine, in 2016. And I applied for another visa for a different friend of mine, okay, which was rejected. So I had a successful application and I had a rejected application. In both of those applications, when I read through it, okay, the criteria with which they were judging the application upon, the public servants their task was to apply the act, the various acts of Parliament, okay? So did the application that I submit pass the various acts? Was there anything in the application that the public servant working within that public administration, you know, the immigration department, with the acts that they administer, is there anything in my application where the public servant can say, no, I'm sorry, that doesn't adhere to the act, so we're going to reject that person based on that. And that's what happened in my second application to bring one of my Thai friends over to Australia. What they said was that there was a specific section that I didn't adhere to, and that's why they said no. And over time, right, I began to understand exactly why they said no based on that particular criteria. I'm not going to go into too many details about it, but that was actually the right decision. That the Australian government made the right decision in rejecting that second person that I wanted to bring over to Australia, based on the act, right? Now, if it's the same thing that's going on at AUSTRAC, as a regulator, that they're looking through the acts, so the AML, the Anti-Money Laundering and Know Your Customer Requirements Act, and the various other acts that they administer, okay, yet they've said yes to FTX, right? So something can be an obvious Ponzi scheme, yet so long as it can pass the various acts, as long as they've submitted an application, there's nothing within the application that is a red flag to anything within the act, then it can still be rubber stamped and approved. It's truly astounding when you think about it, because my company, INTJ Billing, the regulator didn't like what I was doing because I was concentrating on the sex work marketplace, and I couldn't adhere to the requirements of AML/KYC at that time, where at the level of development of my procedures back when I submitted the application. So they said no. Now, was that the right decision? Well, under the legislation, yeah, it was the right decision, but it still blocked a company like me and a person like myself from being able to legally provide services within Australia to the sex work marketplace, right? So it caused me a lot of issues in not being able to go and do things legally within Australia, which forced me offshore to work in a different jurisdiction and to do things differently, so that I won't be a third-party provider, so I'll work directly with the sex industry over here in Thailand, et cetera, right? But it really has made it's really made me think. It's really made me think about regulation, and the FTX could be approved, that they could get on that registry in Australia. For some time now, since my application was rejected, I've thought about making it public, or particular parts about it public, to say, so I'm on the record to say, all right, this is why I wasn't able to get on the Australian Digital Currency Exchange Registry administered by AUSTRAC, because I failed within these particular criteria, right? And I hummed and hawed about that for quite some time, all right? And I haven't made a video specifically going through the application. I've held off doing it. I thought, I don't know if this is a good idea. I don't know. But imagine I did make the video, and imagine I made the video 6 months ago and I put it out there, okay? And it gained some traction, and people started looking at the video and seeing the documents. Imagine I open source those documents, right? That would provide some interest, I think, to reporters. If reporters within the Australian news media happened to go through it and thought, hang on a second, we've got this guy, Clark Towson over here at INTJ Billing, who was rejected, and he tried to do the right thing, and he's a technical expert, and he put through this very well thought out application. There was a lot of detail in it, okay? And he was rejected based on this particular criteria within the acts. Wouldn't it be very interesting then to look at FTX's AUSTRAC application, go through that and figure out why they were successful? Why was FTX successful and Clark Towson wasn't, right? Why was a scumbag organization, a scumball organization like FTX, able to get on the registry? And they even managed to get an Australian financial services license, right? And yet the little guy, Clark Towson, in his one-man company, INTJ Billing, he wasn't able to succeed at getting on the registry, despite being of good character, despite passing a police check, despite putting through his application, despite covering everything that the regulator wanted. It's just a couple of things he couldn't adhere to. We're not going to work with Clark. Let's just cut him out. He couldn't meet the regulations. We're not going to give him a go. Okay. Sam Bankman-Fried, however, money, power, connections, time, lots of resources. He puts through an application and it succeeds. It's just very interesting when you think about it, isn't it? Hey, very interesting. Now, I'm sure this video could attract some attention, right? Maybe there's someone from Austrac watching it right now, right? So what's going on over there at Austrac, okay? The applications that are submitted by companies like myself to try to get on your registries, try to be a registered digital exchange, a registered money transmission provider, okay? What's happening over there at Austrac? You're rejecting some companies that are good companies that are starting out and want to do the right thing. All right? You're rejecting those companies, but you're accepting scumball companies, right? Who've got a lot of money, time, resources that they can submit applications that can adhere to the acts. So should I restart my application? Should I sit down and make a second application? Should I spend the time and the effort required to go through the various acts of Parliament that Austrac, that you guys are responsible for, and make sure that I tick off every single thing within the acts so that my company can get over the hurdle and get onto your registries, right? It's just, something's just not right, okay? If I was working in Austrac, I would not have rubber stamped FTX's application, right? My thinking would have been, this is an obvious Ponzi scheme. Everything else that I have to go through and do the checklist against to make sure that they're adhering to regulations, I wouldn't have even gotten to that, right? If I had a boss at Austrac, if I was working there, I would have said to my boss, I'm not even going to go through this because this is an obvious Ponzi scheme. It's rejected, out of hand, right? You're rejected. Go away, FTX. You are a Ponzi scheme, okay? Right? It just really makes you think. Anyway, that's all I wanted to discuss in this video. I've gone on a bit longer than what I wanted to. Yeah, there's a lot to think about there, isn't there, hey? All right, all the best, everyone. I'm Clark Towson, CEO of INTJ Billing.